Greetings everyone. I wanted to go ahead and show you a little bit about group policy today. So, excuse me, I have my server open, and you have to remember that when you work with group policy management, you got to do this on your primary domain controller. Well, I take that back. You can do it on any of them. It's going to replicate. By default, it takes 3 minutes for any changes that you make in group policy to actually replicate across the domain. Now, it's also important for me to tell you that we're using Server 2008 R2, which is great because it matches and aligns up perfectly with Windows 7. If you were using just regular Server 2008, no R2, that aligns with Vista. So sometimes the group policy objects don't actually translate well because of the fact that it was designed for a different product. So I have my server open. You actually would go into Administrative Tools, and you would go into Group Policy Management. In here, you will actually see, and if you did not do week 7, this is going to be difficult for you. So if you expand it out, you'll see your forest is called evilhangout.org, and in my domains, I just have one domain, evilhangout.org. And when you open this up, you will notice automatically that this will start looking like your Active Directory users and computers. I made one OU in there, and it's called Villains, and in that OU are one group and 2 users, because I just wanted to show you a little bit about group policy management. Now, when we talk about group policies are applied when you start the machine by first locally, then once it looks at the local policy, it goes ahead and takes a look at the site. Now, local policy is if you were not joined to a domain and you logged on your computer at home and you decided to go ahead and put some restrictions on it, which by all means you can. You can go ahead and create a local policy. So a lot of times people come up to me and say, oh, my kids are doing X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, just create a local policy that prevents them. They're like, I can do that? Yeah, you can do that. So local site, domain, and then OU. So you have to remember it as LSD, okay, just like the drug, LSD, and then you say O, okay, so LSDO. So local site domain OU. Now, when you think about domain, this is the domain. Evil Hangout is referred to as a domain. So, or actually, take a look at the default domain controllers. Open this up. There are certain things that are going to be applied to everybody. So when you open this up, you'll actually see 2 domain policies already. One is default domain policy, and one says default domain controller policy. Alright, if you put anything on default domain controller policy, you're really just affecting administrators. Okay? If you need something that is going to apply evenly out on the network to every single user, then we apply that to the default domain policy. And the reason I say this is usually like everybody is going to have a password policy, and you're going to make it 8 to 9 characters. Well, you could go and create one and then link it to every single OU, but it doesn't make any sense. So there's certain items that, since we know it covers every person in our place, then we go ahead and we put it on the default OU. Default domain policy. We also have, we can actually create them for specific OUs. So I have a group in my evilhangout.org called Villains, and if I want to create a new one, I right-click Villains and create and link it here. What that's going to do is I'm going to create the new domain policy here. You can call it whatever you want. Say deny services, just for the heck of it. Deny services. And a starter GPO is one that you actually go, it's a base GPO that you can actually create, save under starter GPOs, and then it can go ahead and be applied very quickly once you make certain changes to it to any OU. So that's also something that's good. So I'm going to say deny service. There's nothing in it right now, so it's actually blank. But the way to get into it is we right click it and hit edit. Now there's 2 items that you will see when you, I'm just going to go to a blue screen here. Okay, well, let me move it up. You see computer configuration and user configuration. Well, there's certain items that apply specifically to users. And if you want it to apply to every user in that OU, then you want to go through that. However, there are items that we actually will apply to the computers. So we can actually go into Villains and add the users, the two users' computers in there, and actually manage their computers as well. So there's sky's the limits when it comes to group policy objects. There's a ton of stuff in here. It takes a while, and you know what? Google's your friend. Sometimes it will actually help you find some of these objects. Now, let's take a look at computer configuration. When you actually open these up, you expand the policies. You'll see software settings, Windows settings, administrative templates. Software settings, literally, that's just for installing software on a computer. We actually use group policy to go ahead and install globally new updates and or new software. And so this is one way we can actually do it. Windows settings, if you expand this one out, one of the more interesting things here, you got your startup and shutdown scripts, but you got your security settings. And this does say computer policy. So we're going to actually take a look at this one real quick because some of the more common ones are right here. You got your local policy and account policy. If you open up account policy, you'll actually see your password policy. So let's go into password policy. Well, I'm applying this to a domain, my own OU, so there should be nothing in here. Now, if you were to go into the default domain one, you actually probably will see items in there. But you'll see they're made up of, these are the different keys that are in here. So under the password policy, you can enforce password history, you got maximum password age, minimum password length, passwords must meet complex complexity requirements, and then you can also encrypt them. Well, this is the great thing about it, which I do like about. If you double click it, it says enforce password history. I don't know what this is about. So if you hear explain, it tells you determines the number of unique passwords that have been associated with the user account. Typically, they do not let you keep reusing a password. So a lot of companies actually have this set to 12 unique passwords per year. Believe me, if you define this and say, okay, this would, if I put 12 here, that means that it's going to remember my last 12 passwords, which is going to prevent me from reusing the same password each time. Okay? And then if you hit apply on this, you'll see it actually change on the screen next to it. Okay? So if you don't know what one is, you can actually go ahead and just, minimum password length. Well, yeah, we can actually say, no password required. No. And also, you have to be careful because sometimes when you actually enable one of these, you're actually denying. So just because you're turning it on does not mean you're allowing the person the items. So like I said, you can define them. Then we have an account lockout. This is used for when users come back from vacation and they've forgotten their password. And trust me, there's so much stuff in here. I don't know where everything is. I know where a lot of it is, but I do want to show you where the templates, the administrative templates. These are newer, which is nice. But you can have actually specific things about your control panel on the computer. So this is, to apply the default user log on. Here's stuff about network layer, printers, systems. Here's Windows components. Okay, so if you're looking for Internet Explorer, and you take a look at some of these items, we can actually turn off ActiveX opt prompt. This means it's not going to prompt you for ActiveX. So you can actually go ahead and control everybody's browser history. So you can actually prevent the deletion of cookies. Now some people do that because they want to find out, they want to gauge where people have gone. So prevent deleting websites that the users have visited. Well, it's kind of a sneaky way of saying, hey, we're monitoring your activity. So it won't let you delete passwords. Now that one I would probably let them do, but a lot of it is just because we just are trying to track where they're going. So That's for the browser history. So you'll actually see all this different stuff that you can actually do. And again, like I said, this is something you got to go through. But there's a ton of stuff here. But you'll notice under computers, you'll see one that says all settings. And this is nice too. This is a little trick I'm teaching you. But if you put it in alphabetical order, you sometimes can scroll through these lists and find something. So if you're looking for something with a D, I can actually highlight one of them, put a D in it. Okay, so here you go. Deny, write access to fixed drives, deploy default. So you can actually take a look at it that way. My computer's going nuts. Okay. The other window that's in here is preferences. And actually this is the one that's actually brand new. So this was not here. But you can actually go ahead and set environmental variables. You can also do folder redirects from here. Hint, 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 hint. Because when there's a couple different ways that you can actually redirect home folders, and that's something you're going to do in your group policy. This is the, we want to do as much as we can through group policy management because it's a lot easier for us to manage. We can centralize management. We can go to our domain controller or one of our controllers and actually make these changes, replicate it across, and be done. So look, there's network shares. So these actually are a little bit different. They don't give you a lot of explanation, but you can actually go ahead and create a new network share right from here. And what that will do is replicate out to every single machine that you have. Now, these are computer settings, so it's going to replicate to every single machine. It's not necessarily going to be based on, well, this will be the machines that are in the VLAN OU. So if you're going to do a network share that's for everybody, you got to do that in the default domain policy. Okay, so that's the computer configuration. Under user configuration, this is where we can actually go ahead and, I'm not going to do software the same, but we can actually, this is where we go ahead and do software restriction policies. So we can actually create a software restriction policy and so that prevents them from, let's say, installing new policy. And actually user configuration, folder redirection, this is where you want to do under user configuration. When you're doing My Documents, it's got to be under user configuration. So you'll actually see that. So see documents, we don't allow My Documents to stay on the computers that users are using because we want to save it to a server where we can back it up. This is where you're going to do it. So new. So you're going to actually do a folder redirection here. The other thing that you have is, in this one, it's more under administrative templates. So if you look at our control panel, here's add remove programs, here's display, here's personalization. So there's all these different things. Desktop. We want to go ahead and put we want to prohibit changes. We can actually do that. The other thing that they actually do too, which kind of annoys me, which is found in the computer setting, is they always get rid of the feature of the clock. Well, they don't want us changing the clock, I get it, but I like the calendar feature. So here are all the different Windows components also. So if you want to take a look at it, I mean, again, there's a ton of stuff to do in here. So, and again, it has an all settings and a preference. So this project is not necessarily going to be the easiest because I'm going to use some of the ones that are more common, but you're going to have to find them. You can use Internet Explorer and Google and say, hey, where do I find this? Where is it located? So even though I might say disable something or delete something or prevent, it's not going to be the same verbiage that's found on here. I'm going to make it like I'm a boss, or I'm saying, hey, this is what we want to do. How can you make it happen? So you guys had a lab. It was one of the ones that we did in week 10 that I provided. There's 2 segments. I wanted you to create that the Rivendell, and then I wanted you to apply the group policy. So it's going to be along the same lines as those, but more realistic on a domain setting. So this week, to recap, you're going to create a secondary server on server 3 in NetLab. You're going to let it replicate straight through, and then on top of it, you're going to add group policy. I am not expecting you to have everything to me Sunday. This is your final project, so I want Visio drawings updated with your shared folders and where you are putting your group policy objects. And if you did not follow your Visio drawing, then you better make it look the same as your servers and network settings. And then you're going to do some testing with that Windows 7 machine to verify that these are actually working correctly. And I'll go in a little bit more detail with that too. But you really don't have a final. This is your final. So this is going to take a little bit. It's going to be a little bit lengthy. So the next 2 weeks you get to finish up on the group policy and just supplying me with final screenshots of the project. So at the end you're going to have a domain controller, a secondary domain controller, and you're going to have a file and print server. And they all should be networked, communicating together, and you're going to use the Windows 7 to test to make sure everything's functioning correctly. All right, I will have more later.